Attention! The Looking Up, Looking Out hosts businesses and services are limited to serving individuals located in their areas and only apply to viewers located in Washington State, Oregon, and North Carolina. Disclaimer: this video discusses health topics in a general sense. This information is not meant to diagnose, treat, cure any condition, or be a replacement for any medical advice. Please seek medical advice from your healthcare provider and medical team. This discussion is strictly for general education only. If you do not live in the Washington State, Oregon, or North Carolina areas, and you have questions about your individual nutrition needs, please contact your local healthcare provider for a referral to see your local registered dietitian. To find out your individual exercise needs, please contact your local exercise specialists. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Talya Jackson, and we are the Looking Up, Looking Out podcast. We are looking up the health information to look out for you. Our podcast touches on nutrition, exercise, health, wellness, and trending health-related topics. And we are health professionals that want to share our thoughts and expertise. I'm here and joined by my two amazing co-hosts, Sam and Riley. My name is Talya Jackson. I'm a personal trainer and health coach. My business is Relife Wellness, and I'm located in Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
My name is Samantha. I'm a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and certified exercise physiologist. I am located in Tri-Cities, Washington. My business is Nutri-Cise.
My name is Riley McCorkle. I'm a dietitian and diabetes educator in Spokane, Washington.
All right, and our topic for today is we're going to be talking about fortified foods. It might have been formerly called enriched foods, but we're going to be talking about what does that even mean? What can you as a viewer look out for when you see fortified foods, and maybe some other fun tidbits about it. So you, Sam and Riley, both are in the food world. So who would like to explain what fortified foods is?
Riley, you want to take a swing at it?
I'll take a swing. So, yeah, fortified foods generally refers to nutrients that are added in the processing and the food supply. So some examples could be like cereals that have, let's say, calcium or iron added so that they can meet the micronutrient needs, or what we'd refer to as the RDIs. So when you see the percentages on the back of the nutrition label, it's kind of referring to, do we have enough of each of those, either micronutrients or macronutrients, to meet what they would consider like an average person might need. So the fortification of foods can be a useful way to do that so that we're getting nutrients without even trying.
Awesome. I think what's helpful is breaking that down before we just kind of share all of the facts about fortified foods. What kind of brought this up to me was just kind of understanding what does that even mean? I meant to share this with you guys, but what I particularly was looking at was something from it's on the FDA's website, and it's just talking about what are some questions and answers when it comes to fortification policy. And you as a viewer, you don't need to read all this. There's a lot to it. But what I particularly want to read is right here, because oftentimes we don't really understand what that means for a consumer. Because I wasn't sure what and why certain foods were fortified and why some aren't. And there are a lot of policies around it. But what I want to share is what foods are covered under the fortification policy. For me, I thought it was anything can be fortified, but that's not necessarily the case. So, according to the FDA, their policy applies to conventional foods for human consumption. It doesn't apply to animal foods, so the feed that they're actually feeding the animals, infant formulas, and dietary supplements. And then one of the questions was, is it appropriate to use any conventional food, with the exception of formula, as a vehicle of fortification for human use? And they said it's not appropriate to fortify certain foods, such as produce. So fresh produce, meaning meat, poultry, fish, sugars, snack foods, such as candies and carbonated drinks. So those don't qualify. And their biggest belief is that, like when it comes to snack foods, that um, they're not naturally nutrient dense. So cookies, chips, cakes, sodas. So fortifying those foods, they don't want to mislead anyone. So reading through this was helpful, encouraging for me to be like, okay, they actually have policies out there to make sure that they're not just throwing in a bunch of stuff in certain foods to make it healthy. So I'm sharing all this, but what are your thoughts when it comes to fortified foods and what you guys know about it? This is what I'm sharing from what I've learned, but what are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing, Talya. That's some interesting information for sure. So from my perspective and like what I've noticed as, in the field of dietetics and everything, fortified or enriched are pretty much used interchangeably. But we typically see them in like grains or like grain products. So for an example, I was kind of looking at, let's see. So every so often I'll have some like a bowl of cereal, and I noticed on the box of cereal that I was having, it said a good source of fiber. And so I was thinking, okay, well, what is a good source of fiber? Like, what does that translate on the nutrition food label? Why would they label it that? Like, what makes this food item a good source of fiber? Like, what does that mean number wise? And so I was doing a little bit of research. I went kind of down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I came across this resource from the American Cancer Society, and they talked about fortified and enriched products. And so I'm going to read it for verbatim. And so this is what it says. So how you might see it on the label. So enriched flour, fortified breakfast cereal. The list of ingredients will include what has been added, such as vitamins and minerals. So what it means, so this term means that one serving of a food, it contains 10% or more of the daily value of a certain nutrient, and most often used for fiber, vitamins, and minerals. And so typically whenever I've seen fortified or enriched on a food product, it's usually like adding some sort of vitamin or mineral to that food product. And for this example, the cereal that I had, it was kind of like an oat-based cereal. It had, a good source of fiber. It was enriched with those other vitamins and minerals as well.
Great.
Nice. Thanks for
Now,
sharing.
yeah, I appreciate the resources you all have brought to our attention. I'm curious to hear about some of the concerns that you might have around additions of different nutrients in the food supply. Though I did want to highlight at least one of the best public health outcomes that I'm aware of was the fortification of folic acid into different grains and oatmeals and cereals. I think this originated in Canada in like the 1980s or 90s. And then the United States quickly followed suit because they witnessed, as we'd see with folic acid deficiency for pregnant mothers, the rate of neural tube defects was was much higher than it was after folic acid was added to the food supply. So basically, by this simple addition, folic acid also happens to be B9. By adding B9 into those grains and cereals, especially for pregnant mothers, they witnessed both in in Canada and the United States, those neural tube defects plummeted to under 10% of what they were prior to the addition to the food supply. So that's a really that's what food fortification should be. There's a couple other interesting examples that are just like come to mind in clinic where I'll have patients who are looking to boost their iron because they've been anemic. And it just so happens that using a resource like the NIH, they have really nice, what do they call? Basically micronutrient fact sheets that highlight the top sources of iron. And above meat and even above clams lies fortified cereals tend to be the highest iron source. So that'd be 100% of your daily value of iron in a cup of cereal. Not that I'm asking everybody to go and to the middle of the grocery store and pick out some boxed cereals, because those aren't always the best breakfast option. But for those who are really needing iron, and especially if for like vegetarians where meat isn't as much of an option, that can be actually a really good source of fortified cereal with iron. There's a third example I could save, but anyway, I think those are a couple of the good highlights of fortified food, but not to say that fortified food is always a success story.
Thanks, Riley. I think that's a really good positive light on it. And even what you shared, Sam, about fiber is, I think the heart behind any fortified foods is if the population of people that we have a certain deficiency, we can safely implement it into something that already has nutritional value and bridge that gap wherever that might be. Where my concern lied, and again, was doing research and I don't have the background you guys have, is can they fortify anything? Can they, put 40 grams of protein in a cake and tell people go eat this cake? Or can they put, I don't know, it could be omega-3s in some ice cream, and then people go get some ice cream. So that was my concern is, are they trying to switch something that we know traditionally is unhealthy and start implementing things that are healthy, but not from the right source? You see what I'm saying? So that was the biggest concern that I had, and as a trainer, I want my people to eat as healthy as possible. But if they're coming to me saying Walmart has a 40-gram protein cake, what? We can't do that. And they wanted me to share my tinfoil hat story, so I'll share it. Where my concern lied is just how I said, and my concern is that they want to keep us away from eating real foods, so that we begin to enter into more of the middle aisle and things begin getting more enriched and fortified, and minerals and vitamins are being injected into all of these things, where you can bridge the gap and supplement. Cheez-Its now have all of the B vitamins that you need. Or, like I said, ice cream has your daily source of omega-3s. So that's where I'm like, where's the line here? So reading what I shared about the FDA, that there are limits, like we're not injecting stuff into snack foods, things that are not healthy. You can, for those who have dietary restrictions, like Riley shared, you can get some iron from cereal. Now, it shouldn't be your main source, but it's an option. And it's probably cost effective for those who might struggle in that area. Or if anyone struggles with fiber, like Sam said, you could have a bowl of cereal every now and then and get a little boost of fiber, which is good to help regulating your system. What are your guys' thoughts?
Hey, Sam, I can take it. Um,
Yeah, go ahead, Riley.
well, well, actually, I wanted to hear just one other piece from you, Talia. So you do feel reassured by the fact that with the USDA fortification policy that uh, like ultra processed snack foods are kind of like exempt from carrying some of the nutrient fortification. Does that make you reassured? Because I could not agree more that yeah, I'm definitely skeptical about the any policy that's keeping us away from eating real foods. It's like we don't actually have to work with our local farmers. Don't worry. Like the multinational corporations that provide Coca-Cola can also provide our daily nutrient, values of
Yeah.
so that we're basically relying on supplements. Yeah, anything that detracts from the real food, I think, is something we should definitely be skeptical about. But do you feel reassured that some of the like ice cream is off limits for an omega-3 fortification?
I will say it is a temporary sigh of relief, is what I'm feeling.
Nice.
Policies can always change, loopholes can always be found, but it's at least temporarily reassuring to see that in black and white, it says specifically, there are policies against things that do not have naturally occurring nutrients. But nothing is set in stone. So that could change next month. But as of right now, they are abiding by, okay. And something also when I was reading through it that, and this is dealing with mostly processed things, but if say during the processing process, something, the value or the amount of a certain mineral, nutrient, vitamin, whatever is extracted, they can then replace it and put it back in. So however they process it, it loses some of that value. They can put it back in because it was already in there. So something like that is reassuring, but to me, it's nothing is set in stone. So there could be, there's already protein ice cream. So now they can, put stuff in, which I want to, I don't want to discourage anyone. Like things like that every blue moon, that's fine. Nobody is perfect. It's okay. You don't have to eat perfect 99% of the time. Like that's not reasonable as human beings. But I definitely am still leery and cautious of how far the fortification can go. And if it stays true to wanting to help the general public or just fill the fat cat's rich pockets.
Yeah, those are
Great.
all great points, Talia. Sorry, guys. I was actually reading this article that it's a dietary reference intake and it's guiding principles for nutrition labeling and fortification. And they were talking about kind of like early fortification, history of fortification. As you guys were speaking, I wanted to just like see if there was anything out there. It's pretty outdated, but a little bit that I read, it was saying that at one point, sugar was considered like it was a food component that was considered to be fortified, but they didn't end up doing it because they were worried about misbranding. Because if you think about it, like if it's table sugar, the more the fortification is healthier than the actual product, so then it's misleading to the general public. And so I think to answer your question, Talia, like I don't see the policies fortifying the fun foods like the ice creams and cookies and cakes and things like that, just because it could be misleading and misbranding and confusing to the general public. And of course, we want all of our fellow clients and viewers to, focus on eating whole foods and healthy foods and getting their vitamins more naturally from natural sources. But if we were to, find these products that happen to be fortified or enriched, at least we know there are, some nutritional value in those products, even though they're highly processed, and some of them can be not the greatest sources of some of those vitamins and minerals, but they do have some in there. I think they were really mindful about like the toxicity levels and making sure that it's a food that is able and stable to have those types of enriched ingredients in it. To add to Riley's list of examples, I've seen like orange juice be fortified or enriched with like vitamin D or calcium. And I would like to say like an educated guess that these, policies have hopefully the best interest of the public, and maybe they go off of, and I haven't looked into this, but I could see them going off of research and in numbers of, most nutrients and micronutrients or vitamins and minerals that the public is more likely to be low in. And so that's maybe why they pick certain ones to be fortified in these products. So say, for an example, if we know that, orange juice, it's a popular breakfast beverage, a lot of people buy it. Maybe this is a example, so this is not real numbers, guys, but 1 in 5 families buy orange juice and have it as a breakfast beverage. Knowing that 1 in 5 families do that, that's a pretty high number. We're going to include vitamins and minerals and enrich that product because we know that most people might be deficient in vitamin D and calcium, and so let's go ahead and enrich that orange juice because we know it's popular and people will drink it and hopefully help their levels in that micronutrient.
No,
a really
I
good
think
example.
I would hope that is the intention. That's me looking at the glass half full, is that is the intention of helping the general public and being less deficient. I would love for you guys to share your thoughts, because what you said, Sam, kind of sparked the other side of the coin. We've been talking a lot about a deficiency. It can also be the toxicity if people are getting too much of a certain nutrient or vitamin or whatever. Can you guys talk a little bit about that? Maybe we can do another podcast on supplementation, because yes, we want to feed deficiencies, but we also don't want people to get too much, because too much of anything is never good. So what are your guys' thoughts on that in relation to fortified foods?
Well, I've got a couple of fun examples for excessive amounts of nutrients. I found it interesting when you said that the snack foods cannot be one of those, or like carbonated beverages can't be one in the food supply that is fortified, though we have so many options on the market now for these sort of like almost like new agey, they're energy drinks, but they're beyond, uh, one that might rhyme with Onster or Oxstar. But they have B12, like 1200% of your daily B12, and then people are having multiple of these a day. B12 is not something we need to worry about too much. It is water soluble and it can go out the kidneys. But it is interesting that the body hangs on to B12 for like 3 to 5 years. So it seems like really excessive. I know B vitamins are kind of loosely like energy vitamins that are keeping our metabolic wheels turning. So we can definitely go overboard on B vitamins, but which could potentially be taxing on the kidneys. So I am curious about how some of these like new age energy drinks, healthy energy drinks, are able to get away with that. And then we've seen a lot of these like keto breads on the market that are, 2 net carbs or 0 net carbs. And it's primarily because the starch is fiber. It's synthetic fiber. So it's basically like you're having, I don't know why they just don't brand it as Metamucil bread. But it is interesting that people on these like low vegetable, low fruit diets are having tons of fiber in their MyFitnessPal tracking, and it's because of the keto breads. So who knows what all that synthetic fiber is going to do. And I think also if you're having that much synthetic fiber, you're probably not getting this sort of like vitamins, minerals, hydration, like we've talked about in previous episodes, that you would get if those are from fruit and vegetable and legume sources. So it's a lot of fiber and not a lot of like naturally occurring vitamins or features. I guess the final piece is like the carrot trial. You can go ahead and Google it or ask your AI. Carrot, CAROT. It was a randomized controlled trial. It was run with like tens of thousands of participants. they were looking at these carotenoids, which had been known to be potentially cancer reducing, but they found that the people taking the carotenoid supplement actually ended up getting higher rates of cancer over time. So the trial was discontinued early. They had people stop taking the supplements because the effect they wanted to see was going the wrong way. So it speaks to the fact that there might be more value in the foods themselves and less of the value in just trying to do some Frankenstein nutrient supplementation. So those are just some weirdo examples. But I guess if we had to tie a nice bow on it, I mean, the people who are having protein, whole grains, fruits and vegetables, dairy if you can tolerate it, those people are not going to be developing these nutrient deficiencies and are probably going to be nutritionally adequate. And you can just work with your dietitian or your nutrition-informed personal trainer on identifying any potential insufficiencies if you need to supplement here or there. But it really just comes back to the boring old balanced diet.
Thank you, Riley. So, Sam, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, all good things coming from Riley and his perspective. I would say, so typically, like Riley said, if you have, for the most part, a well-balanced diet, you should be getting all those nutrients and vitamins and minerals through your diet. And so you have a lesser chance of having any of those deficiencies. Sometimes, doctors might, I've heard doctors, prescribe multivitamins and again, remember it's a supplement, so it's supplementing whatever we don't get from foods, but doesn't mean that we have to fully rely on supplements and those kinds of foods where they have, like Riley mentioned, those, I don't even want to call them enriched foods or drinks, but those beverages or even certain kind of like the protein types of foods and beverages to, solely rely on our vitamins and minerals. Just because, we want to get them from those food items that have them naturally occurring. But yeah, there's water soluble vitamins, and those typically have a lesser chance of being at toxic levels. Like if we intake foods with those water soluble vitamins, any sort of fat soluble ones might have a more increased chance of having, us having those toxic levels. But it's pretty, excessive amounts and everything. And I don't want to get too in detail because we could just go into a whole new category and rabbit hole on that. But yeah, for the most part, I think as long as we're, exercising regularly, eating a well-balanced diet, we don't have to really worry too much about deficiencies. A lot of the time I tell, because besides having a business, I am a WIC dietitian in Tri-Cities. And so I tell a lot of my clients who have like the low iron or anemia, diagnosed with that from their doctor to, seek out sources of foods that have the iron, which comes from like our meats and eggs and protein sources like that. Some vegetables as well. So yeah, I think there's lots of information we could dive into, but yeah, I think, trying to incorporate all the food groups is more beneficial for our micronutrients, our vitamins and minerals, and making sure we're having the amounts that our body needs.
Thank you, Sam. Well, there you have it, y'all. Full discussion on fortified foods. Hopefully, this is helpful in understanding what that is, things to think about positively, things to think about negatively, things to look out for, and maybe even, hopefully, my theory doesn't come true. Because if I see an omega-3 ice cream, I'm going to be really upset. But thank you so much for watching this episode of the Looking Up, Looking Out podcast. Stay tuned every first Tuesday of every month for a new episode. And you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. The link will be in the description below. My name is Talya Jackson.
My name is Samantha Tai.
And I'm Riley McCorkle.
Thank you for watching. See you next time.